much. So, Gateway again. So I think 4 times starting something new. It's like a serial entrepreneur, right? So talk to us about your journey and how it is a little different than what Broderick said.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I will say, and I'll admit quite unabashedly here, that I have evolved myself as an entrepreneur. My very first ventures, if I look back, I look at some things I did and I feel now that how could I do that? That was a pretty foolish thing to do. You know, I had no right to be an entrepreneur with that idea or with that market opportunity or with that size of business or that approach. And I've evolved. So if you look at the most recent company that we started, that I'm running right now, that was a much more measured, calculated approach. And I feel like I started it for a very different set of reasons than I started my first one. And you know, when you look at starting a company, the number one question you have to ask yourself is why are you doing it? And you shouldn't do it because you expect certain outcomes. You shouldn't do it because of the glamour. You want to do it because you genuinely believe with an extreme level of conviction that you have an opportunity to change the world in some small way, maybe a very small thing, but you have some way to contribute to society. And so in order to do that, though, you have to be extremely honest with yourself. We did a tremendous amount of homework with, as Prabhat said correctly, the number one goal is to find something that, or to build something that someone wants. If nobody wants it, then you should stop, or you should pivot, or you should change your direction. Because while that conviction is critical when you start, it is equally important to add a dose of reality to it and make sure that when very early on, start something that you genuinely believe has an opportunity for success and for you to do something different. Later on, you're going to need all extreme levels of optimism and determination and perseverance and all that. That comes later when you're running the startup, when you're trying to scale it and build it into something meaningful. But early on, you have to have that conviction, but you have to add a level of reality to it. Make sure that you do all the things that Prabhat talked about. Find the right market opportunity. And once you do that, then I think you're on the right track.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you so much. So Prashant bhai, so this is, you founded 2 companies now, one successful exit last year. So talk to us a little bit about obviously where and how it started. Did you ever know that you'll be an entrepreneur? And this idea, let's take it a little bit further, right? In terms of how do we pressure test an idea? How do you even know that this is going to work? Like if it's something, I think we'll figure that.
Sure, thanks, Ranjan, and good morning, everyone. So before starting, I had joined 2 startup companies, and they didn't do well, but that's the whole learning phase. I've been itching to start a company, but I'm always nervous. Should I do this job? What will happen? Blah blah, and very kind of like surmise in a state. But I've been prototyping an idea for a while, but I didn't find the strength to move forward. Like 2 things happened in 2015. One is I met an entrepreneur who was there before. So my mom passed away in 2015. I took a different culture. I said I want to try this. To get the inhibitions that I had before, all the inhibitions I wanted to get out of it, right? All my hiking, all the crazy stuff that I do now, it started from that days. So then I decided that I would start a company. But I had done homework before to start that company. After 4 or 5 years, we decided that it's not good. We tried various things, didn't work. And then I ditched that company and we started a new company called Diablo.ai, and it happened to get acquired. But the whole idea is we have been experimenting on ideas beforehand and talking to customers, and potentially we had the proof of concept customers lined up well before we were ready to launch. that was very critical for us to move forward. So over the years, I think the learnings what KG and Prabhat were saying helped me a little bit to move forward.
Thank you. The way, thank you so much. Thanks. I think this is very welcoming. Request you all to ask questions, right, as opposed to we. And I'll really open it up. I think that's how the panelists wanted this to be done. There are many questions we have. But I also want this opportunity to thank Anjan Panda, who is also been a moderator here. And so one of the ventures that some sponsoring this is Greenbird, which is a startup again. That's great. The startup is actually a sponsor for this event. And also we have Snehal from Indus Valley. So I think he is also helping many startups, right, as they think through their next step. So thank you again, Snehal. Really appreciate that. And Prasanta Vera himself, he is also a sponsor for the event. So with that, let me actually open this up to you guys. I have also a few questions, which I will, keep it for the last. You have a question, Mike? Please go ahead.
You are all serial entrepreneurs, performance, and your journey. I think of one example from Blue Box to Apple to Next to Pixel and back to Apple. Steve Jobs' journey was that he was very passionate, and you said that you should look for market opportunity. Steve Jobs created a market. We are not that. We are not that brilliant. We cannot create markets. But what Steve Jobs did, from Next, it was a failure. But he learned a lot of things from Next failure. I want to know, Prasant, you said two of your ventures didn't work out, but what did you learn from it?
Sure. Two things were important to us. One was we had a lot of challenges with raising money. We raised money, but then the whole process was new to me, so we had a little bit struggle there. Because some of the venture, so the key thing for us is until you have money in the bank, you're not there yet. So we had a lot of VCs who signed up term sheet, but then backed out last minute. So we don't, so that was one learning to how do you tackle this whole VC and raising money, help me in the next startup. The second one actually was when to pivot. So we had a lot of discussion, and at some point in time, after 2.5 years, we wanted to pivot, but there is a whole struggle between the founders of pivoting. And that is a challenge, right? Because it's like your baby, you don't want to give it up. I think, it's just like everything else. It's the right way, we should keep forward, we should push forward, but at some point you need to say, hey, this is enough, we need to move forward, do the pivoting. That thing I think helped us in my next startup is, we said, okay, this is the market, what are the opportunities? Should we just sell it or move forward and raise a lot of money and go forward? Sometimes you need to look at it and say, hey, let's do an exit and raise some money and then move forward. So that's my thing. That's great.
The other thing, Prasanth, you said that when your mother died, you got into many crazy things and you start writing poetry. Did poetry help you in your entrepreneurship?
I don't know, but yeah, that's the stress off. That took the stress off. That's what definitely. Yeah, and I'm volunteering with ISML and a couple of Satwik and other bunch of kids I'm helping a little bit here and there, but it's just a blessing.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think, this is great. So I'm about to ask you a question. So I know we spoke about that. So down the road, it's an extension of what he asked. So many of us are when we're thinking of starting a company, right? We're on jobs. I'm sure this question is crossing everyone's mind. So how do we go through that emotion and feeling of quitting the job? Should we quit the job even because there is an expense, people are raising kids, there's a family to take care. There are more wins, right, than gains, one would think. Talk to us a little bit about what you've gone through really, how did you really face this?
So I think it goes back to my original point, right? I think you have to have the right reason to make that decision. Too often, I think entrepreneurship is glamorized, and it's not for everyone. And that's the first thing I think I would make a comment on. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone, and there is nothing wrong in not being an entrepreneur. There are plenty of incredibly respectable roles and positions and professions out there that don't involve being an entrepreneur. So you have to do it because you want to do it, you want to make a difference, and you have this deeply held conviction that you can make a difference and you want to make a difference. And so, Prabhat talked about, is it fundable? I look at it a little bit differently because, with apologies to anyone who's a VC here, I have plenty of extremely close VC friends, but VCs are a secondary aspect of it. Do you believe you have an idea? And do you think you can make a difference? And because the idea will be funded, if it's a good idea. At some point or the other, you'll find the VC who will fund it. If you, again, go in with the criteria that you need to be paid on the first day, you need to maintain your job security, or you need to become a billionaire or millionaire or whatever it is, those are all the wrong reasons. And so if you do it that way, I think the path is automatically a little bit smoother because you have this conviction, you have this desire to make a change. Yesterday, I think someone was saying, I think the painter, he was saying that the fact that I made this move automatically made me successful, right? When he had a job at IBM and he decided to become a painter, that itself made him successful. So I would look at it the same.
And you were working before, like,
Yeah. I did have a job. I did paid well, and I was successful. But I'll give credit to my wife as well. She encouraged me.
Yeah. So that
was very helpful.
Thank you so much. The fact that we have Mithani here. So I don't know the transition, right? I think it's a good question, at least from my vantage point here. So when someone goes through the transition, right, how does it really impact on a personal and family level? In the sense, like, tell us a little bit more about the brighter and the perhaps not so brighter side of that transformation journey.
A job. It's a full 24/7. I mean, they'd be up at 2 o'clock in the morning, just thinking about it, not able to sleep. So to expect them to pitch in other ways may not be possible. I mean, it will impede their journey as an entrepreneur if they have to think about mundane things. I'm not saying the wife has to do everything, but understanding boundaries and managing your expectations and understanding this is a long haul. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it's never going to be over until it's over. I mean, there are good days, there are bad days. Once you know that, you have to learn to appreciate the journey because it's not the destination. There is no destination, let me tell you. One problem finishes, the other one started. So having that conversation with your spouse is very important.
That's so great. That's such a beautiful angle. It's a journey, right? And Johnny Walker, perhaps a big round of applause for her, just standing through him, I think, all throughout the journey. So, and Johnny Walker rightly said, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's about taking that step. That's perhaps what they're trying to say here. Another question, I know I have one more question for Prabhat Bhai here. Anyone else would like to ask? Please go ahead.
So I'm a second year college student, so younger generation. So for younger people, the idea of job security, we don't have that same level of financial stability that you guys have. I think that's better for younger people right now to look towards entrepreneurial outlooks, or should we focus on getting a job that we can work 9 to 5 in the short term so that we can have financial stability in the long term to create a company or move forward in ventures?
Before that also, I want to say we have a young entrepreneur there in the panel, Sajag Agrawal. He just turned 23 and he already raised money, millions. So we'll hear from him as well, but I'll let the panel answer that.
Okay, that's a very good question. So primarily, I'm talking about, little bit of my experience of from our time to current situation. There are a lot of funding available from the universities. Okay, now if you go to the Berkeley has their own fund, UCLA has their own fund, a lot of these schools have their fund, and they have their entrepreneurial skill set to develop in their labs, and they encourage people to come out of the early from their graduating there to experience the entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of opportunities already available the place you study nowadays. So you can avail that and see if it really fits into your category. If it really fits your to your dream, your desire, for your fulfillment. Okay? So once you try it out to see whether I really need to go and do entrepreneurial right away, or if I want to get some real work experience in some other companies to acquire those, then get there. So that's up to you to decide, but at least you can try it out nowadays with so much of available facilities.
So I
So
guess
that's-
like, for me, the one distinguishing thing is, I don't remember, in the yellow. Right, he was talking about how ambition plays into one whether. Sorry.
I could hear you, I'm sorry.
I heard the yellow
part,
but I
didn't hear anything else, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Mr. Ganamati, sorry. Anyways, you're talking about how ambition plays a critical role in an entrepreneur's success. So do you think for younger people, because younger people generally have very strong ambition, but have very weak follow through on that ambition. So do you think that if a younger person has a strong ambition, that they should focus on that rather than going for like a short-term 9-to-5 job so that they can get money to fund their own company? Or do you think that they should get some sort of financial backing so that they can have at least a chance of, or a greater chance of success? Because for example, in 2021, right, the government reported that 87% of small companies failed within the first 6 months of being created. So it's very like hard for me to get in a spot where I can be comfortable to look for an entrepreneurial opportunity.
Yeah, I think, again, I don't think it's ever too early to start in entrepreneurship. If that's if that's the blood that runs through you, it's never too early in age. And again, and you shouldn't do it based on the statistics that 87.5% fail, because you do it with the conviction that you're going to be one of that 12.5%. You don't do it with the intent to be financially secure. If that's the intent, take a job. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that with any kind of prejudice. If that's what's important, do that. If your intent and your desire is to go and there's a fire burning inside you to go build something and change the world, then the financial security should not matter. You should do it earlier rather than later, because you'll learn from your mistakes today and you'll get better tomorrow.
It's very hard for me to adjust. All three are very close to me, Prabhat and KG and Prasant. My name is Gyananandan Das. I have been in the Valley for 43 years. Started with IBM, and Larry Ellison hired me as his chief technologist. So I remember the day I joined, a couple of days later, he introduced me to Steve Jobs. At that time, Steve was doing Next. Larry's word is, I have stolen him from IBM. He's going to fix my company. So Steve looked at me, he says, you better fix his company, otherwise he won't have money to fill up this lake. That was the thing. And in IBM, I had a chance to work with Bill Gates when we were building a product and he was trying to take the contract. But I sit on a number of boards and many startup companies, many of them fail. But the point I want to make is, all the points these guys are making, resilience, conviction, proof of concept, these are the fundamentals. You know, there's a company, and sometimes I work with companies who have these non-linear ideas, which seems crazy. And then ahead of their time, one of the entrepreneurs, when I was advising, a brilliant guy, and he's built the company, struggle, finally got an exit with Microsoft last 2 years ago during the pandemic. Another company I sit on the board, they have been there for 10 years. Finally, they're taking off. But this persistence, not quitting, and making sure that that will happen someday. Another company deals with videos. Long time ago, that there was no market. The market came. So one of the messages, if you persist and that with a conviction, eventually success will come. Quitting is very easy. Thank you.
This is from someone who said, Palm is not sentient yesterday in a conversation with me. Handing back to Ranjan Ratha.
Oh, that's a blog I wrote, AI and sentience real. That was the question mark.
Yeah, so thanks. Thank you. Like, this is a word of wisdom. I appreciate that. Any questions from that side? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there are a few more questions.
Daddy question.
You can ask a dad a question.
Yeah, maybe not just for my dad, but just quick, I guess. Also, you know, when you've been in the field a couple of years, I think what's hard is you start thinking of new ideas. And a lot of times companies have IP that they've already put together for some of these ideas that they don't even use, right? And so I guess what's your advice? It can become discouraging, right? When you think of a cool new idea that's not in the field yet, but someone already has IP on it. You give advice to talk to an IP lawyer right away and see how you can get around that patent already, or do you try to license, or what's your advice there, or do you think just pivot completely and try to think of something different because you want to bring that technology to the field?
So one of the things we did, we patented some of the ideas. But the patent process was a very long process so typically the IP part, what you are developing, even if not related to what your company goal is, it will go with your company. But this is one of the company's assets into the whole system. If it's completely different from your goal, then we can package it and just sell that IP to some other people who can develop it and get to the product. Or this becomes also another asset to the company, which you can expand when when your goals expand and you already have achieved your primary objective.
Well, I think the question is different. I think he said that if we start now, even if I feel that it's a new idea, there's a high likelihood that some big companies have already staked an IP claim on that. And they are just not using it, but they have either published in the paper or they are holding the IP. So what do you do to circumvent that? Like, how do you work around that? First of all, for many young entrepreneurs, they may not even have resources and money to inspect and find out whether it is patented or not. And if they do they hire an IP lawyer to negotiate with no funds, with no experience, but they know it is practically possible to do it, and then some other big giant like Microsoft or Google is already holding a patent on it. So what do you do in that case? That's the question, right?
Yeah, so I do have some experience with this. One of my companies, we licensed some IP upfront from UC Berkeley and use that. But you don't need money for these things upfront. There are plenty of universities, companies. I cannot speak much about the medical field, medical devices field, but certainly in the tech sector, universities, companies are all happy to license you their patents or their intellectual property just based on future earnings and future revenues, and not have major upfront investments to enable that. What Prabhat is saying is right. Our company and I personally, I have over 40 patents, but if that's something you want to build later on, then you should do that for trading with other companies. But when you're starting out, it's entirely possible to license patents. You should not, I don't think, in my opinion at least, you should stop pursuing the company simply because you think someone has intellectual property or patents.
I think just a little bit addition to this thing. So we have here Prasant Mahapatra, the Dean of UC Davis. So, oh no. So, but one of the things we explored, what are the ideas patented there in the UC Davis, and see if anything fits into our domain there. So. Just to let you know that we have one person here who has been doing all this, ideas, patents, selling from the UC Davis.
I can comment on that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so give us a couple of minutes. So we would love to listen what you say the answer to the agenda. So we would want to focus back.
So what he's trying to say is it's an extension, all right? So we'll just organically transition now, but I would say thank you all. I mean, again, I think we'll continue the discussions. There'll be more questions. I have 3 rapid fire questions, and I'll wrap it up with that. So the first is, Kejivai, to you. should just rapid fire, so there's no right or wrong answer. Should we indulge in grand vision or incremental advance?
Without a question, grand vision.
Okay, great. Over to you. Is this the power of idea, the product, or how you sell or take the product to the market?
I would say it's a difficult thing. It's both needed to be successful. Okay, this is not just the product, or it's not just in the selling, right? But you have the right product, and also you need to sell.
Yeah.
So I think it's both is needed to really be successful.
Yeah. Okay. So, as an entrepreneur, do you believe in creating monopoly or thriving through the competition?
I thought more like thriving in the competition.
Yeah.
I felt that if you look at just like patent, you will eventually find there are many companies that in the field, especially in my area, which is the data. There are like a lot of you see a lot of companies. So there will be competition, but if you have a unique solution, if you have unique something, that's what I think to be thriving.
Thank you all. So with this, let me actually transition you to Satvik and for you to take this forward with Sujat. So youth perspective, right? So
All right. Hello, I'm Satvik. I'm a high school student here in the Bay Area. And I'm really pleasured today to talk to Sajad Agarwal. Sajad is the founder of a company called Movely, a venture-backed company that is powering the next generation of retail brands with quality control. Previously, Sajad started 2 e-commerce companies, starting when he was just 13, which is pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit, start off with, your childhood. A lot of what you did back when you were, 13, 12 kind of led you to where you are today. So let's talk about like, what did you do back then, and what were a couple key insights that you gained that kind of led you to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So Movely, my current company, we do supply chain tech. And if you would have told me like 5 years ago, I would have been in supply chain tech, I would have been like, that's crazy. Like, no way. Like supply chain, like that's terrible. Like, no way I want to be in that. But the biggest thing for me is like, and what I feel like what led me here in my journey is kind of like more so like engineered serendipity. So starting when I was like 13, 14, so like a little bit of my story of kind of how I got into e-commerce, super random, like just not something that like I tried to do or something that like it kind of fell into it. So I was at the mall with my mom and we were going shopping, and it was my mom and my sister, and they were taking hours to shop. And I was just absolutely bored. I had nothing to do. So I just sat down at the corner of the store and I was like, I need a new cell phone charger because my cable just broke. So I went on eBay and I was bored. So I started sorting from high to low. And I found out you could buy 500 of those cables for like $500. And they were selling for $7 for each one. And I was like, oh, wow, like, wait a minute. And so that's actually how I got into my first business. I ended up buying 250 of these cell phone cables on eBay for $250 and then selling them for $7 each individually. And first time I did it, I made a lot of mistakes and I ended up basically losing all my money. And basically what ended up happening is half of my shipments did not get shipped properly, half of them were damaged, there were a lot of problems. Then I did it again and I made some improvements, I fixed things, and then I went and sold another 250 units, and that did pretty well. And I was able to pay my mom back in like a couple weeks for like the $250 that I originally borrowed from her. That's actually how I started my first business. And then after that, I was making a lot of junk, and I was like, hey, you know what, let me stop selling a lot of this junk that I'm buying from China, and maybe I want to make my own products. So I started talking with suppliers in China, just like staying out to like 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. Like if you talk to my parents, I actually missed so much school because I was so tired, and my teachers literally hated me. So I was always making up work. But ended up starting my own brand, and then I grew that pretty considerably in a pretty decent size in a very, very saturated market. And then that brand faced a lot of quality control problems. We were producing products like hundreds of thousands of these iPhone cables, surprisingly, same business, and had a lot of issues. And then I ended up basically moving to China, learning a lot about quality control, learning a lot about supply chain, and that's how I ended up where I am today. So it was not something that like, it's kind of like, as, a little bit of what we were hearing over there. It's not something that, hey, I planned this and like, it was like a target. It was more so like enjoying the journey and just going through the process. And that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think honestly, the whole idea of just that eBay reselling type of thing was kind of resonated with me when I first talked to you, because I remember when I was a kid and me and my friends, we'd often go to sneakers, and what we would do is we would resell them. And so I think what's interesting about you is you were taking a basic passion of just reselling and then constantly trying to see where the opportunities were and trying to improve them. But one thing I thought was really interesting when you were talking about this was this idea of engineering serendipity, right? And so obviously we're in the OSA convention and there's just many prominent people here. And what would you say is like probably the best way? Because many people will say, you should be networking in these conventions, but it's kind of daunting, especially as, a high school student or college student. What would you say is your tips and kind of any interest to kind of networking here in such a large convention where you can find these kind of opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I think is really key is that, you can leverage your age. So like if you're above like 30 in this room, sorry guys, like not gonna be able to use this trick, but like if you're like under 25 or so, you go to conferences and you're like, hey, I'm working on this and I'm working on that. And I'm looking to do this. A lot of people that are way older than you kind of take an interest and they're like, oh, you know what, this reminds me of when I was 20 and now I'm like 50, right? So I feel like age is like definitely like something you can use to your utility if you're starting younger versus like if you're starting older. So like, for example, like when I initially wanted to reach out and I was working on some ideas and I was testing pieces and things like that, I ended up just cold emailing a bunch of people with just like a very heartfelt message, like, hey, like I'm an entrepreneur, I'm X years old, I'm really working on this. Here's a little bit of what I've done in the past, da 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 da. And I'd really love to just chat and connect or something like that. And, a lot of people responded to that. Actually, at one point, I literally connected with one of the directors of Stanford GSB just off a cold LinkedIn email. And so you can open a lot of doors just by kind of leveraging your age and having some level of idea, in your mind. But I would say, like, obviously have some level of like conviction in yourself. Like you need to have confidence, and at the same point, like you need to have some sort of like thesis. Like even if it's the wrong thesis, as long as you can back it up, you've done a little bit of thought into it, and maybe it's not something you're going to pursue, but you don't want to go to like a convention or a conference, especially for like a specific type of business, and then be there and be like, yeah, like I'm not really sure what I'm doing, da da da. Because no one's going to hand you a business, right? At the end of the day, you have to know what you need to do. But as long as you have that beginning setting of like, hey, this is what I'm looking to do, this is where I'm trying to get into, then when you go to that conference, you go to that event, people will help you throughout that process, and you'll end up connecting with a lot of people.
Awesome. But then you were also talking about this idea of like connecting with VCs, and obviously as a young person, especially me as a high school student, the idea of getting funding seems really, especially like, you see people getting hundreds of millions of dollars. The fact that I could get 50K seems like crazy to me. So you, in your journey, you started off doing a lot of fellowships and accelerators, specifically the On Deck Fellowship, which is based in San Francisco. What are these, like try to explain a little bit what these accelerators are, and then maybe go into how that helped you out and how that led you to, maybe get funding later on in your journey.
Yeah, definitely. So what's really interesting is that, for like the traditional path, you go through an accelerator and then the accelerator gets you funding, and that's kind of how it goes. I actually had to take a different approach because raising money when you're 22 or 23 years old or whatever is actually really difficult. Because at the end of the day, like if you want to raise money, there's two ways of raising money. Number one is go to Stanford, and the other one is go to Harvard. And if you don't go to Stanford or Harvard, you go to Columbia, there's a massive drop off in your ability to raise a bunch of money. But if you do go to Harvard or Stanford, you have a check in your bank the day you end up with your admissions letter, basically, if you want to. So I went to a non-target school. I went to Indiana University, which is still a really good business school, but at the end of the day, it didn't provide me any benefits when it came to actually raising money and raising venture capital. So what when it comes down to raising VC money, it's very difficult to do that. And there's like a lot of different aspects. The key thing that kind of helped me through that is really just cycling and really developing on the vision and the idea when I didn't have venture money. So when I got into like the like On Deck program, for example, business at that stage, I've been already running like Mobley for at that point about 2 years. And we already had a lot of traction that I just built out manually, just cold emailing people, talking with people and things like that. And that traction, along with some level of product vision, was the reason that I was able to get into those accelerators and start opening those areas. But accelerators and specifically like fellowships like On Deck, for example, they're really, really valuable. Accelerators are a little tricky. Like there's a lot of accelerators that are almost predatory. There's not a lot of good accelerators. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of Y Combinator. Y Combinator is a fantastic accelerator, but like there's a lot of accelerators there that are not that good. And one of the biggest mistakes that you can make in the initial stages is joining the wrong accelerator or taking a check from the wrong person. Because once you take a check from somebody, you're in a position where when you go to the next somebody to raise money and you want to bring in good investors, it's like, oh, have you guys already raised money? And it's honestly a better signal to have not raised money than to have raised money from a bad investor, because that just signals no good investors wanted to invest in you. So it's easier to kind of play a game where you're heading in the right direction, as long as you're playing your cards right, versus taking money just for the money and also joining the wrong accelerator.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually, now that I think about it, you brought up a good point of the idea that, many people, especially my age, get kind of get somewhat impressed by this fact that, oh wow, there's gonna be a lot of money, and so any contract is a good contract, right? But
yeah, and just to add, also like was first time I saw the number, I was like, this company raised like 5 million. Raise 20 million, and I see all these big numbers. Like, wow, like it shouldn't be that hard for me to raise money. Raising money, I should be able to go raise 20 million also. Like, and the thing is that, like, as we've seen with the panel here, like a lot of our panelists here have a lot of different exits. And then they go out, they raise more money, and then they have another exit. A lot of that money that's being raised are also from serial entrepreneurs. These are the guys that have built, sold 3-4 companies. And that's the reason we're seeing valuations, the way we're seeing valuations and rounds that we're seeing where there's rounds. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, like there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's going to be really, really difficult. It's not, it's not impossible. It's difficult, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think I want to kind of pivot over to a different aspect, right? So when you started Mobley, I think one thing you were talking to me about was just this idea of just constant iteration. And I think even the panelists brought up that point where it's like trying to find that passion point in that market, and then just constantly ideating. And so that takes grit, right? That's gonna, you're gonna always want to quit at one point. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about grit, they're just like, you need grit. And then they don't ever explain what that is. Like, how do you keep up that kind of nature of grit? I know it's a slightly weird question, but how do you get that grit, right? How do you keep that patience to just constantly go through those valleys and troughs?
So first of all, it's just getting desensitized to stress. So traditionally you might go and you might have an assignment at school and you're like, wow, like I need to go do this assignment, and you're super stressed out and you wait till the last minute and then you just do it all at the last night and then you're good. Like, it's about setting good work habits. I think is number one, where you have to be motivated enough to like get up every single day and like work morning to night if you need to. So that's number one. And number two is just really getting desensitized from stress and like figuring out better ways to manage that stress. So like maybe learning meditation. One of the things that I started doing early in my journey is I actually started doing sensory deprivation floats, where you actually go in a sensory deprivation tank and you just lie down in this tank for an hour and you're just alone with your thoughts. And I did that for like 3-4 times a week for a couple of months, just until like I was able to control my brain and just be able to like say, okay, hey, I can be alone with my thoughts, that my thoughts don't overwhelm me, and I can manage this level of stress. So that way, when I start running a business, I don't have to worry about that. Like, there was a time in my life where I couldn't sleep because every 1 hour I was scared. I was just waking up and checking my email. And I was like, oh my God, like, what if I got like another email, or like I got an important email or something like that? And it's about realizing also that like, hey, at some point things will wait for you. And it's more important for you to be productive and more important for you to actually have your head on and screwed in right than for the business to work. So prioritizing health over the business and prioritizing health over success, that's very, very important, because if you don't prioritize your health at the end of the day, you're not gonna have anything.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna open up to Q&A. I think there's a lot of people that have great questions, so.
I have a comment and question too. But just want to tell you, when we're looking for some youth entrepreneur to inspire our young people, I was looking at connected with Sajak, and I had a dinner in New York, and I was blown away by his story. This guy, during college, he dropped out for 8 months, went to China, he lived there to understand it before even he started Mowgli, because this is something, he's the intermediary between US business and China. This is amazing, because I was blown away, and your age was like some teens that time. So this is what the inspiration is bringing us to us. And second thing also, I want to recognize, like we are all parents, I want to recognize his parents. Can you stand up? And this is, yeah. This is what they encourage their kids to take this challenge, right? The question is, what is that, what motivated you, like drop school, go to China and do that? And, maybe that will be a little inspiring, but we'll open it up. And next one, I want to say, we have OSA Innovation Council who is doing that. So we'll introduce, they can at least say 3-4 minutes.
Yeah, so what motivated me to start my initial businesses was a variety of different things, a lot of different challenges. So first of all, it's just kind of watching my parents go to work. So like my dad would work crazy long hours, he'd be awake every couple of nights. He's a doctor, he's a physician, that's what he does. And my mom had a job, and we lived in the middle of like a cornfield in India. I don't know why. Ask my parents why. It makes no sense to me. Still doesn't. But my mom would commute an hour every day to work, so I would barely see her. She would leave in the morning before I wake up, and then when she'd come back, like 7 p.m. And by that time, like I'm already about to go to sleep in an hour or two or whatever, right? And I was like, hey, like my parents are working so hard. We're living in the middle of a cornfield. Like this is not really my ideal life. Like I would much rather not live in a cornfield, and I'd much rather not like ever be at home or be able to see my family and whatnot. So I was like, hey, I want to go build a better life for myself. And the way that I'm going to do that is not working some 9-to-5 job. I want to have that freedom. I want to have that control. I want to be able to control my own schedule. So I went in with that. And that was very naive to think, because I cannot control my own schedule. And it's worse than a 9-to-5 at this point. But at the same point, obviously there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what I work towards. And in addition to that, the second aspect for me was that in high school, so my first businesses were cash flow positive, and they were not built to the model to be venture backed or raising money, things like that. And so another reason that I did that is I just saw that I could make some free cash and make some cash flow for myself to pay some of my bills and some of my expenses, buy myself clothes, things like that. So that's the second part that really inspired me to start my business. So the initial goals were very different from what they are today. But it was kind of like an evolution in the journey as time went on.
Any other questions for the panel? One question, I'll take it from there. I see, I'll take one question from there. One question, please keep it brief.
Hi, my name is Yashin Rise Engineering College. My one question is, you have like multiple ideas. With startups, you must have seen different pain points here and there. Like, hey, I can build this, I can build that. What are the key factors that you look into when differentiating? Hey, I should put my focus on building this startup or building this idea or pushing this, moving forward, as opposed to the series of other ideas that you have.
Yeah. So my thesis on this is that you can spend hours and hours, days and weeks and months strategizing and figuring out strategy and things like that. And it's a lot. It's very easy to do a lot of that up front. What I realize is that whatever you do up front doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, as soon as you really start going, it all changes and goes in a completely different direction anyways. So what I learned, what I've seen in my journey, at least personally, is that it's way better to just go ahead and get started with something and start talking with customers. So if you start talking with customers and you start bringing on customers, understanding their pain points, and like helping them in some sort of way with, even if it's not the full version of what you want to help them with, eventually just helping them with a small subset of one part of their problems or things like that for what you're trying to solve for them. I think that's a great way to get started because eventually you're going to build up a customer base. You're going to learn way more about the problem and the space than you're ever going to know before you go ahead and get started. And then your strategy and your form changes over time. And then you're going to develop in that right mindset in that form of differentiation and the way that you want. So I'll let the journey kind of decide that versus like trying to front load a lot of it and then letting that scare you from getting started.
Thank you.
If you would be looking, I'm looking for somebody named Dr. Sujay Singh. He sponsored Youth Entrepreneurship Award, Samik Singh Youth Entrepreneurship Award, long time way back in OSA to foster the spirit of entrepreneurship. If you would be hearing Sajak talking about utility, talking about automated thinking, talking about health, you are basically listening about wisdom. So I would want to switch over to the young generation. I'm taking this mic back to one of the winners of the Samik Singh Youth Entrepreneurship Award. Her name is, she is going to introduce herself. And her question will be to the panel. You can take one by one, but let's listen to what she says. She is one of the winners of the youth competition.
My question to you guys is, as you were growing your business, what was the biggest challenge you guys ran into? And as a new entrepreneur, what should I expect as I'm building my business? What should I prepare for that challenge?
That's a great question. So please pick three who is going to answer that. I'm handing over the back.
That's actually a very, very good question. And as it's always a big challenge to scale. For example, like, the few startups I had, we started when doing the product development part of it, we kept it places where we can have people, get good people and keep them together for a longer time to get there. Then the next question comes out of scaling. Having the right resources is the biggest challenge, and to find them. So in the last company, we had a global part of it. So we had some in it at Malaysia, some in it at India, some a little bit of the Eastern Europe. But these are like limited resources. You can really scale this thing. But now to the scale next level, we're in the engineering side, this thing. So we have to go to India to really make it 300 people, 400 people, or 500 people, which you can really difficult to find in the other places where you had started this thing. And for those reasons, particularly for India to grow to that scale, now it's, it requires a lot of money and effort, and also convincing people to stay, because it's traditionally they think that they keep on changing. And you need to apply that equation that the people will be churning this thing, how I can have stability over there in the scaling. So you have to plan ahead to add that to your factory. So it requires a lot of effort to really scale big way and to grow. And of course, you need money for that. So if you have already raised the money for the growth, or you need to plan ahead to start raising money for the growth. So that goes on.
I think this is one of the greatest challenges of entrepreneurship, right? It's taking the plunge is one thing, but growing the business is really fraught with risk, because that's where all the uncertainty, the vulnerability of the business kick in. Yesterday, Ritesh Agrawal was saying that, you think you're the boss, but you have many other bosses. Sure, you have a board of directors and the employees and the customers and everybody else to report to, but don't make any mistake about it. You're in charge. So don't confuse having bosses with not being in charge. You are in charge and you are responsible for every little aspect of the business that causes it to be vulnerable. You know, you can lose a customer one day. There's some discussion there about, you know, waking up every hour to look at your email. You could lose an employee, you could lose a customer, the money could maybe not come through from a bank, maybe your letter of credit doesn't come through and suddenly you cannot make payroll. So every single day, every single week has its challenges, and every decision you make has implications. So what you really need to be doing when you're in that growth phase is, it's like any baby and any little, you know, animal, little cub. You have to nurture it, make sure that you're watching every aspect of its growth, and just be prepared for it.
I'll just say one thing that I used, a specific example. We didn't have money yet. We were starting. So what I did is I sent email to many people, like a lot of young people who are coming from India. They're just graduating. They need a training, practical training, and they need some company where they can get some certificate. So I sent a filler, and many in LinkedIn, and many of my many of the friends that we know, they say, hey, my niece is working, my son is working, they need help, they need to help you. So I got like 4 or 5 very good smart kids. They're all they came and helped us. So that helped me a little bit to move for the product. Now they're all working in Google and Uber and all the places. It also gives a satisfaction to me because I was helping them. But that's one technique I used.
So one more thing I'd also add is kind of like a little bit as to what's already been said, is just the people. So what's most important in business at the end of the day of business and economy, from what I've seen, is just people. And if you have the wrong people in that group, it doesn't really matter. So initially when I started the business, I started my business, I was like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and I don't need to hire people. If I need to hire people, I'm gonna pay them a little bit of money, and I'm gonna pay them as little as possible, because like, I don't, I'm the one running the business, whatever. And it's very easy to fall into that mindset, and it's a little bit of a trap. Because if you want to build a good business, whether it's a venture-backed business or if it's a business you just want to start by yourself, bringing together really, really good people is going to be the end result of like a good company. So if you have a really good person, like a really good partner to work with, or you have somebody like that on your team that takes an ownership, partnership mentality, that's going to make a huge difference. So, you know, always kind of think in the context of we and like how I'm going to scale this. And one book I'd recommend reading that completely changed the way that I think about managing businesses is actually called The E-Myth. And I'd highly recommend reading that book because it completely changed the way that I think about businesses, running businesses, delegating and hiring people. And that's actually the reason I was able to build out a pretty large operations team even before raising any venture money, just because I was able to manage a lot of the risks with limited cash flow from hiring because of that book specifically.
Thank you so much. So I think we are at the inflection point now. We'll be transitioning to our next session, but let me take this opportunity to actually introduce Snehal. Snehal, so first of all, thank you for being our sponsor, right? It means a lot. Second thing is you are part of the ecosystem and trying to help companies get incorporated, help them think through their contractual challenges. So I know oftentimes there are great ideas, and when we are ready, right? So that's when we start to think, how do we incorporate things? How do we protect our IP? What are some of the contractual things that we need to think about from a law perspective? Capitalization, right, is an important question. I know you help entrepreneurs, founders think through and go through that journey, right? So we would like to actually hand this over to you to talk a little bit about that. I know you had a presentation. I don't know if it's with us or not, right? I mean, you don't need a presentation per se, but please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for that. And I just stand up address. I had a presentation, but I think I'll speak impressive. I think it makes sense to tie in some of the things that we've discussed here. I'm Snehal Patil. I'm the CEO founder of a startup law firm in Silicon Valley called Indus Counsel. As the name itself suggests, it's a tie-up of India, US. Personally, I grew up in India. I'm licensed to practice in India. I worked in the Indian civil services before I came here. I worked at a leading law firm in Mumbai, which is part of Arthur Andersen. DSK Legal. And then when I came here about 18 years ago, I worked at several large law firms and then set up my own law firm called Indus Counsel. Think of Indus Counsel as my own startup contribution. What I will speak today will be more on bringing in like the concept of partners. It's not just your internal partners, your core team, your investors, but also very importantly, your external partners, the lawyers, the accountants, any other advisors that you want to bring. Now, speaking purely about law firms or lawyers, it's very, very important to bring in a good startup lawyer on day one, as soon as possible. I can not stress enough on the fact that I've seen so many times that startups have gone on their journey for a while, and then we have to unravel things because they already made some critical legal mistakes. And it's always very difficult to fix something after the fact. I'll give you a simple example. You start on a good, happy note. You have a few people who come together, want to band together as co-founders, start the journey on the right note. Turns out a few months later, you have a founder a co-founder who doesn't believe in contributing to the team. Unfortunately, unknown to you, you handed out maybe $500,000, $1 million of vested equity to the founder. Now you don't want the founder to hold on to the equity. You're sweating it out there. Your co-founder is playing golf or doing whatever they want with their life, and they have a valuable equity. How do you unravel that, right? Sometimes you incorporate companies in the wrong jurisdiction. It's very, in Silicon Valley, especially, the norm is to have it incorporated in Delaware so that it's very easy to get funded because the VCs or the angels will look at the right corporate structure. You want to keep your focus on your business, on your IP, on your core team. You don't want the legal to be the focus. The legal due diligence at any stage should be a breeze, right? And that's only an experienced startup lawyer will be able to know. For instance, on capitalization issue, right? What is the kind of capital that you want to offer? What is the number of authorized shares you want to offer? Whether you want this equity to be split into dual class of stock. Do you want common preferred on day one? Do you want that shares to be fully vested or vesting over a period of time? Whether vesting should be tied up based on certain milestones, or should it be time-based? Should it be the same for the founders and the rank and file? Should it be the same for the advisors? These are very critical questions that many entrepreneurs, especially early stage, unless you've had an exit, and like some of our panelists said, that early on they made mistakes, which could have been legal mistakes also, that now they know in hindsight are something that they should have avoided, right? So these are the kind of things I would stress. And very importantly, on the point of fees, like our young entrepreneur here raised, firms like mine, we work well. Yes, we have our mature clients, Fortune 50, Fortune 100s of the firm world where we bill hourly, etc. But we do also routinely work with startups where we take cash and equity, or many times we pure equity play. We like to grow with our clients, so willing to take the risk. We also have incubation programs. We have our own network of investors, especially early stage seed investors, that we will bring to the table. And so the journey is more fruitful, because I think that's the fun about startups, right? I mean, you win some, you lose some, but the whole journey, the whole excitement of contributing something new. And honestly, lawyers like us also learn a lot when we work with bright minds, some of whom are here in the room, and I'm sure many of you are stepping onto your next journey.
Thank you so much for that as well. While we are slightly behind the schedule, still I will take the opportunity to in the Samik Singh Youth Entrepreneurship Award, and I'm walking up to him. He will have one question. Based on his question, we'll see who would answer it from the panel members.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Arif Sahu, and I'm currently going to 10th grade. And I have a question for Jack. So, many of these billionaires, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, they dropped out of college. They got accepted into Harvard and Ivy League universities, and yet they still took the decision to drop out of these colleges to start their own business. Even you dropped out of school to start your own business, and you became successful as well as Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. And on the other hand, people who go to these Ivy League universities get more VC funding rather than people who drop out. So what do you think is better? If you have the fire, should you drop out or should you go to college to get that extra boost, the VC funding?
So first of all, for all the parents' sanity in the room, I dropped out of college twice, but I did finish school. So I do want to make that clear. But that's a really good question, and it's very tough to answer because it's not a very case by case basis. But being a Harvard dropout, being a Stanford dropout, still gets you VC funding versus like attending Harvard and Stanford. So I have a lot of friends that go to Harvard and Stanford, and they've raised VC money, and a lot of them chose to drop out after raising VC money, and they got the Harvard dropout or the Stanford dropout tag. So if you're in Harvard and Stanford, you have a good idea and you want to raise money and you raise money, dropping out is looked at like as a really, really good thing. If you're in a non-target school, and I'm not talking, like non-Ivy League, like even after like Columbia and Brown, like other Ivy League schools, like it's a big drop off in VC funding after Harvard and Stanford. For those kind of schools, and non-target schools, it's very dependent because if you drop out, you're not going to have a resume to go out and raise money. It's going to be very, very difficult to go raise money. It's going to be very, very difficult to really go out and build out on your own. So you're kind of fighting an uphill battle versus like Stanford and Harvard, it's more of a downhill battle. So I want to make dropping out is definitely something that is tricky. But what I did in my school, for example, to run my business is that I basically set up my classes and I set up my frameworks so that way I would have time to run my business, and I grew my business simultaneously while being in school, and then raised money while I was finishing school. And one tricky aspect to that, like for example, like I could never post my age online because I literally had clients and investors following me that didn't know how old I was. So when I turned 21, for example, I couldn't put an Instagram post out because I literally had like 20 clients following me on IG, and I couldn't put a post out. So there's like a lot of different like weird quirks that happen, but it's definitely doable. And like the way I did that is I just basically took as little credits as possible to maintain full-time status and still graduate on time. And then I did school every single year, just because it allowed me to alleviate my schedule. So that way, I had time to run my business year round, because you can't just run your business only in the summer. So that's essentially how I did it. So my recommendation is if you have a really, really, really good idea and you go to Harvard and Stanford and you raise money, go for it, drop out. But if you've not went to Harvard and Stanford and you're not, you're from a different kind of school, and if you raise money, go for it. It could be a good decision, but it's also risky because you graduate and your business doesn't do well, especially if you don't raise from tier 1 VCs. Like if you have a YC tag, you drop out of school, you're going to get a job no matter what. Doesn't matter what school you went to, but if you don't have a Y Combinator tag to Indiana University and you dropped out, you getting a job is going to be fully reliant on your connections and your ability to sell yourself to an employer, and you're going to have no backup plan. And then you're going to end up going back to school when you're like 23, and it's going to be kind of really weird because everybody there will be like 19. So that's my recommendation. It makes a lot of sense in some areas, but in a general case, like college does definitely get like a bad rep. I don't think it's super useful. In a lot of sense, I don't think I learned a lot in school, but it was just more so like it's self-development journey for me, and especially socially, which I think is very valuable as well.
Great question and a great answer. And what, if you'll be watching it keenly, what was not explicit was the social aspects of it. A kid would not be able to post things naturally, as in Instagram. So I'm not sure if all of us are watching the social aspects of it. I'm seeing a couple of sociologists in this forum. I'm sure they are watching. They're taking notes on the impact of socio-entrepreneurial aspects of it. With this, the focus would actually move on to Odisha. All of us are associated with Odisha, and Odisha as a society, Odisha Society of America's event is that with this, I'm taking this mic to two gentlemen who are representing Odisha Innovation Council of OSA. So over to Prakash Moduli and Manoj Mishra.
Yeah, my name is Prakash Moduli and Dr. Manoj Mishra. We just started an innovation council under the OSA umbrella last year. And so our goal is to actually connect with the entrepreneurs to the investor, mentors, and service providers. So just a forum. So we just started actually helping 3 startups back in India, actually in the Rourkela primarily. So sort of 3 projects, and we're trying to do that. So if you are an entrepreneur, okay, looking at forum to kind of find, mentor, advisor, or investor, that could be a way to come. Or if I didn't know about you guys, and we can try to help us because, you can actually have a lot of expertise. So a lot of people back in Odisha need help, right? So that's what exists. So you can reach out to me or Dr. Mishra.
No, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you very much. And in fact, we have an advisory panel, and Ajay Bhai is here in our panel, and Mr. Bakchi, and 3 and we are 4 group member, right? Yeah.
So we are told only socio-cultural organization, but there are internal aspects of it. So thank you, Dr. Moduli, and thank you, Dr. Acharya, for getting this done, and thank you, Dr. Mohanty. So with this, I believe we are waiting on Zoom call with Purna Mohanty. I think he is probably on Zoom, and if he's there, I'm waiting for his response. Once he's on, I'll bring it on. But I will probably. Okay, I'll give this time to Dr. Ajay Mohanty to represent his section of it. After which we'll make an announcement from Dr. Rai, OSA Vice President. So over to Dr. Mohanty to representing his NEPO project.
Hello, we'd like to. Hello, yeah, we'd like to announce the name of. What winners is Anissa Boxy. Yesterday, actually, when the award is announced, he was not there in the audience, so we'd like to present the award to him. Or Ajay Mohanty is going to do that. Anissa, can you please come here? Please take a picture. Anybody here? Yeah, can you? Thank you. Congratulations, Anissa. Thank you. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Ajay Mohanty. I'm in different committees from OSA, so I had to run between these 2 meetings. I'm also a founder and director of an entrepreneurship forum for NEPO, and it was actually launched. A soft launch happened on March 30th in Bhubaneswar. We had invited the Chief Minister. He could not come because he had to go to Delhi to meet the Prime Minister. But the rest of the ministers, the IT Minister, MSME Minister, secretaries, they all came. That shows the importance of entrepreneurship. Taken very seriously by the Odisha government. It is, the creation of jobs is extremely important. Odisha's youth unemployment is quite high. It's very, very high. It's close to 33% officially. So you can imagine how many young people are on Odisha. So when I said this in my meeting, government statistics. So we have to, anchor entrepreneurs. 30 years ago, I was in China, and when coming back from the Great Walls of China, I could see that people are selling little toys on the roadside. Whatever they make, they will have to sell. We must produce something to sell, in our own state. The fortune of the people have to be improved. So entrepreneurship is extremely important. This GDPO actually envisions to create, but mentor 100 startups in the next 5 years, at least 20. Help them facilitate an environment where they can grow and scale. That is the main motivation. And the global community of Odias, there are plenty of entrepreneurs. You can find 100 mentors. I actually we formed this organization so that we can find that mentorship. Somebody had asked a very brilliant question: how will you scale entrepreneurship? There are 3 bigger challenges. We actually just announced, and we want to scale it. We face a lot of challenges. It's expensive to scale, and the focus gets, somewhere shifted. When you scale from, say, I want to mentor 100 to 500. Expensive, focus shifts, and all the problems amplifies. How do you really connect to all these entrepreneurs? That is a very, very excellent question. And I wish I had time, but you can look at gnepo.org and everything is there. Thank you.
From his words, I wish we had time. We entrepreneurs find time. Anyway, so with this, I would like to switch over to Purna Mahadev. He has been a Odia entrepreneur who has his own startup. So Purna bhai, please unmute yourself and then you will be on the screen.
Yeah, namaskar. Thank you, Bhai Bhoni Mane. I am just so sorry that I could not make it to the convention. I hope you can hear me. I have to zoom in from home. I got tested COVID positive just on Friday morning. Can you believe it? I just couldn't make it. So that is how, I thought I should not miss this event. So that is how, Anjan, thanks to you that you asked me to come to Zoom, and it's a great session. And I don't have much to add to this, but I must tell you my personal story a little bit and based on my learnings, so that this may be good for future entrepreneurs from US and India. So I started my entrepreneurial journey almost 25 years back, a little bit here and there, but I started my first company with Kishore. He may be in the audience at the moment, Kishore Mishra, back in 2005. So both of us ran a couple of companies and we sold those companies pretty successfully. However, the situation is, we sold our companies too soon. So one of the learning that I had is patience is the key. Patience is the key. You have to, Rome is not built in a day. It takes time to build a company up. So at this moment, we have founded a company called Marquee Semiconductor. And believe me or not, we have been doing business in Bhubaneswar, India since 2006. So we are the first semiconductor company in Bhubaneswar, India. And I have been pretty involved in Bhubaneswar and Odisha high technology ecosystem since 2006. So basically, for me, the recipe for success is, let me tell you in a few lines, the recipe for success. First is, it's called CFC. First is the customer, right? When you start a company, before even you start developing a product, try to find a customer. Try to find a customer, that's the key. You might have the ideas, things like that, but if you cannot find a customer to start with, everything is a moot point. So customer is the key. Second thing is the founding team. Guys, you need, it's kind of a 3-member team to make something happen. It's called a CEO, who will run the external part of the company. The next one is the COO, who will do the operational part of the company, and the third one is the CTO. So try to find founding partners who can do all three things. So that's the founding team. So customer, founding team. The third thing is the culture, guys. Culture is very key. As I said, Rome is not built in a day. There is no instant gratification here, right? Resiliency, persistency, never give in, never give up. Those things are very key aspects of entrepreneurship. It's not easy. It's not easy. You're like we saw in the session, right? One spouse spoke up. Spousal support is the key here. Family support is the key here for success of an entrepreneur.
Thank you,
Okay,
Punawai.
so I think these three things are pretty key. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Punawai. So for taking your time, I think I am going to have an interview session with you to take this, convert probably into a blogger.
Of course, yeah, no worries, yeah.
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
with this, I mean, we are going to the closest part, the last part of the seminar. So we had Mr. Prasant Behra, who was one of the panelists. So we had winners of hackathon. So I'm handing over the mic to him to be able to tell who are our winners in different categories. So Sajak and Sadhik, please stay here because youths would be more and more and more. We want the youth element, right? So over to Prasant Behra.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to stop you before you get lunch. So this is exciting. I always love hackathon. This is the second year we have been doing hackathon. This hackathon has been sponsored by IASF, Indo-American Civics Foundation. It's a volunteer organization which have a booth. And we have Odisha.ml, which is also a non-profit organization which is trying to spread machine learning to Odia diaspora. And of course, OSA convention. So we did the hackathon over the last few weeks. So I'm going to just announce the winner. I didn't make a certificate. I was just lazy, but I also believe that certificates are useless. Okay, but I always believe the code is important. Certificates are to hang in the wall. So with that, I'll invite Sajak to give the winners. I'll announce it. If you are here, then I'll hand over to you to check. If you are not, then I will get it to you. So the first category is called agriculture and climate change. And the first prize winner is Pixelators, Rishabh Sahu. There. Okay. Oh, the second there is a joint winner in the same category, and it's called Team Aqua, Shreyas Nayak and Adarsh Jena. I think they are from North Carolina.
Will Rishabh is there in the audience? Rishabh Sahu?
Rishabh Sahu is there?
No.
Okay. No, okay. Okay, moving on. Category agriculture and climate change, same category. Second prize is Team the Giants, Nishit Panda and Samran Mishra.
Awesome. Sometimes we would probably have Sajak like the youth element in it. So
I've been talking the prize to him. So I've been talking to him. He has a booth in the Downstairs Center and Greenfield.ai, right? Greenfield.ai, and it's pretty interesting actually. So you should please talk to him. Thank you. Okay, the next category is sanitation and public health. Team Mind Mapper. Shravani Patnaik, Alina Patro, Fiona Sahu. Whoa, that's a big team. Awesome, guys. Great job. You'll be an entrepreneur like him soon. I'll be watching you. Okay, let's take a picture. You're taking a picture of son and mother also, right? Oh, okay. Welcome. Great job, guys. Great job. Thank you. Same category, sanitation, public health. The second prize goes to Team Hospitality Online. Discipline and Arihan Swine. It's very interesting to the website details, so hopefully it'll be useful. Now, we had there are a bunch of submissions which are one each for different categories. I put them together. There is a category called Odia Community Together, right? And the team is Saha Katha, Nirvika Chaudhary. She's as the first prize, she's an 8th grader. I was just amazed by her the way she explained the project and did a machine learning model. 8th grade, I didn't know anything. So these kids are way ahead. So Nirvika Chaudhary, first prize, I'll mail out the check. Wish you all, thanks for all the people who, there are 21 teams, 21 people who think they will start the hackathon. Ultimately, 10 teams participated, and we look forward to have more competition in the future. So thank you very much.
Cannot have a session without thinking sustainability. So the mic goes to somebody who is passionate about sustainability, and I would request him to speak about sustainability while we are closing this entrepreneur sessions. We grow very fast and it has to be sustainable. So over to Canova. Okay, so Canova's message is ESG. Please think of ESG when you are starting a convention. So thank you for coming into this entrepreneurship session. I heard a feedback that this is one of the most engaging sessions that was conducted ever. Thank you so much.
So Abhijit, thank you so much for conducting this, getting this session recorded. Santanu bhai, apanko namaskar korchi. Thank you for hosting this Zoom part of it. You were live streaming the Be an Entrepreneur session of OSA Convention 2022 from Sacramento. And with this, I would request you to formally close the Zoom session.